Hello, welcome into WLOY, Loyola Radio, streaming online at WLOY.org and Campus TV channel 111.1. You're listening to After the Whistle, Loyola's premier sports talk radio show, airing every Monday from 3 to 4 p.m. and every Friday from 1 to 2 p.m. Welcome into another Friday edition of the show. I am your host today, Jeffrey Bozzi, alongside my co-host, Jimmy Cody. Jimmy, how is everything going on this Friday?
Everything's going all right. Just another sports weekend in the works. Um, I'm excited for some Loyola sports. I feel like that's the biggest thing that's going on this weekend. Obviously, we got the basketball team having a game tomorrow at home, and then we also have the lacrosse team playing on the road at Rutgers tomorrow. So that's exciting. So we'll see what happens with that. Hopefully, we can go 2-0 in that department. And then also, I'm pretty sure the women's team, the women's lacrosse team, have a game this weekend. They won against Towson.
Yes, they went up the road to Towson and they won 16-5. So they're off to a 2-0 start as well. And now they have a little bit of time off before their next game. So yeah, they handle their business. But yeah, let's get into the men's game. They go up to Rutgers for their first road test of the year. And I feel like coming into the year, Jimmy, Loyola was kind of the team that was hunting, meaning that they were trying to prove themselves a little bit, coming in unranked. People didn't really know what to expect from the Hounds this year. But after beating Maryland and Johns Hopkins in their first two games of the season, I think it's safe to say that now people are going to be hunting us. I think we're going to be the hunted. So I think this first road game at Rutgers is going to be tough, especially because Rutgers is coming off a loss to Army. So they're definitely going to be fired up and wanting some payback there. And it's not going to be an easy game. I mean, Rutgers is a good team. They were in the Final Four last year, and they are still ranked. They're number 14 in the inside the cross poll, tied with Duke. So, I mean, they're right there with the thick of the other teams. So, yeah, what do you look forward to, Jimmy, in this game tomorrow? What do you expect the Hounds to do? What do you think the keys are to success?
Well, like I say every week, it starts with our defense, predominantly with our goalie, Luke Stout. He's playing really good the last two games. We want to keep up that intensity on the defensive end because I feel like that kind of gets our offense going, kind of starts on one end with great intensity, and then it leads to good possessions and better shots on the other end. Just really an entire team effort. That's what I think we really need to see, and that's what we've seen the last two games. And also, I think we have to focus on how the team's going to play on the road, right? Because it's our first road game. Our two wins, which have been phenomenal games, have both come here at Wrigley. So not being home is going to be a little bit of a difference for us too. And obviously, it's a drive to New Jersey. I have no idea if the team left today or is leaving. I would hope they leave today. But when Rutgers actually came here last year, I don't know if you remember that, Jeffrey, but they traveled the morning of and they forgot their jerseys.
Yeah, it's completely bizarre.
Yeah, that was probably the most bizarre thing I've ever.
I mean, that never happens. I've seen it happen in college basketball, I think once or twice, but never in lacrosse
Yeah, I mean that was
or other
pretty
sports.
that was pretty insane. But looking back on it, I mean, they just delayed the game a little bit, and it ended up working out fine. That was last year. But when it comes to this game this year, we also got to see Rutgers. Like this is their first home game as well. They had that loss to Army, but maybe in the second game they'll be better. I felt like we got better from the first game to the second game, so I can't imagine what Rutgers is going to be like.
Yeah, they're definitely going to be fired up. And I agree. I think it needs to be a total team effort because I
It's
think,
going to be a tough game.
yeah, I do agree. It's going to be tough just because I feel like, I don't know, people are going to be coming at Loyola now because we've kind of put ourselves in the map in a big way. So, yeah, we're definitely going to get Rutgers' best shot. And going back to your point about just playing together, I think that's huge. I feel like these first two games, especially offensively, I feel like the communication's been so well. You can see the balls whipping around from one side to the other. I feel like it's not like you're giving the ball to someone and then you're just getting out of the way and you're letting them go ISO. I just feel like they're doing a great job of passing and cutting and just running their offensive sets. I think that's the key. And then back to the defensive side, I mean, that's the bread and butter of the team. That's the backbone of the team. You got to capitalize on offense, but you also need to let your defense kind of take care of its job because you got a rock back there in Luke Stout. And I
It
think,
almost it almost feels like so far we've had kind of, I mean, two things we can count on because I feel like our offense has been phenomenal in addition to our defense being like playing to a really good level. Like it on both ends, it's been really good. So it's like I trust both sides. I just feel like I don't even know what's the better one yet, now that I really think about it, because I feel like we really have a shot at such an impressive rate, really.
Right. I think if you're asking me to pick one, I think I trust the defense a little more. And there's no shade of the offense. I mean, they've put up, I think, 12 goals in both games so far. So there's nothing to be ashamed of there. It's just I feel like there are certain points in the game where the defense, I think, has gotten 5, 6 stops in a row, and the offense has only scored once or twice. But there are some instances where the offense has scored on 4 straight possessions.
Yeah.
I just feel like sometimes, I don't know. It's not going to be that streaky all the time, but I don't know.
It almost feels like the good defense leads to the offense. So that's kind of why my first answer was focus on the defense, because I feel like everything kind of flows from defense. It's just like, oh, Luke's making a great save here. Like now, next thing you know, we got a chance to go get a goal at the other end and capitalize.
Right. Especially if you get a turnover off a defensive play, you get a ground ball, you can get out and run in the fast break. And then I feel like just offensively, they've been very patient. And I think using the entirety of the 80-second shot clock, that's been really good so far. And I think we've done a great job of doing that. So yeah, I just look for us to do more of the same, honestly. I wouldn't change much. I know it sounds like, I don't know, fluff, but if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I think that's just what we need to stick to until something happens and we have to adjust.
Well,
Because I just can't ask for anything more. I mean, I've been so impressed.
I almost feel like I don't want to say that we like this game is going to be tough. Like even though that we are 2-0 and they're 0-1, and looks like on paper, like, oh yeah, Loyola should win this game. By no means is this a cakewalk. Like I wouldn't even be surprised if Rutgers was favored in this game.
Yeah,
I would not be surprised at all. Like
I wouldn't be surprised if we go up there, we play well, and then we lose by a goal.
Yeah, like it's going to be an absolute dogfight. Not to mention, it might snow tomorrow in New Jersey, so we might be playing in the snow.
It's another element you got to add
And it was
into it.
75 here yesterday, so that's gonna be a very big change. What do you say?
Yeah, I mean, when you're going from sunny and 45 to snowy and 30, I mean, that's a huge difference.
Yeah, yeah. And the biggest concern that I have going forward is just how are we going to react to the adversity? Because I feel like everything's kind of went our way because we've been playing so well. We have not trailed it really at all.
No,
So,
I mean, the Hopkins game, it didn't really feel close. I think that's what you said
yeah, it did
on the
not, it
Monday
did not.
show. And you're right. It didn't really feel close. The Maryland game was close. I think in the first half, it was 3-3, and then it was 5-4.
But they never had the lead now.
Right. And I remember you saying this when we were watching it together. If Maryland somehow got the lead, I mean, that could have been, I don't know, death row.
Yeah,
Could have been the end
A
of it.
momentum killer.
But it never happened. We responded very well. So I think that is the key. If we get down, I don't know, 2-0, how are we going to respond? I think it's a fair question to ask because we haven't been in that situation yet.
Oh yeah, certainly. And that's a fair question to ask about any team who hasn't faced that yet, and it's still so early in the season.
Right. Especially you're talking about a team that's 2-0 and no one really saw this coming. It's just
That's for
completely
sure,
out of
too.
nowhere.
I'll tell you my biggest concern for tomorrow. Just because it was such a problem that stood out in the first game, it was the ground balls and the faceoffs. We got killed on the faceoffs in the first game against Maryland. They obviously had a really good faceoff guy from what I saw, and you were saying that as well.
Right.
But obviously in the Hopkins game, it got a lot better. But it's still something to worry about. 1 out of the 2 times that it's happened, hey, what are the chances that Rutgers really beats us on the faceoffs? And it could be a challenge for us, right? That you would almost be asking your defense to do double the work.
Right. I know. If you don't win the faceoff, it puts so much pressure on the defense to get the ball back to the offense. So I do think that category and that department needs to be cleaned up a little bit. I thought the ground balls were a little bit better last week, and so are the faceoffs, but it's tough to win when you have those categories not go in your favor most of the time, because those are 2 huge categories. We need to win one or both to win games.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially too,
Totally agree.
and you bring up facing adversity. I mean, I hope we win this game, obviously, but we have a quick turnaround. We play Wednesday at Towson, so
Yeah, and that's going to be a tough game.
it's gonna be a
too.
tough game as well. I know it's not that far away because we don't have to travel very far, but we have that game and then we play Lafayette next Saturday at home. So 3 games in 7 days. It's a lot.
No, it's going to be a lot. We're going to have our work cut out for us. You're not going to win every game. Like there's going to be games that obviously, I mean, we hope we win every game, but I'm sure there's going to be one at some point the team does lose. It's just about how you react, right?
Right.
Like, if we do lose to Rutgers, that means we got to come out against Towson and really show who we are again. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or if we do have a nice win against Rutgers, and then we got to make sure that we don't look too much ahead to Saturday. to a big conference game against Lafayette and forget about Towson, because there's been times in the past where we have been ranked and Towson hasn't, and they've beaten us.
Yeah, and then just looking at the upcoming games, I mean, Rutgers is probably going to be the toughest game of that 3-game stretch.
Mhm.
And then if you included the game after Lafayette, we go down to Duke. Duke might be the toughest game of that 4-game stretch, but Duke and Rutgers are kind of on the same playing field. So that's going to be a tough game as well. But that's obviously a little bit farther down the road. The number one priority, though, is beating Rutgers, because Towson's going to be a tough game. I don't think they're as good as Rutgers, but they give us a game every year. And then Lafayette,
It's a rivalry game. That's why.
Lafayette's not, yes, exactly. Lafayette's not a huge challenge in terms of they're not really at the top of the Patriot League, but it's a conference game. So that's
you wanna start
another
off.
huge important game that you want to get to 1-0 in the conference.
Certainly, because we know better than anybody, not that there's not that many spots up for grabs in the tournament, right? Like we didn't make it last year. Like we're more than likely we're gonna have to probably be a top 2 team in the conference to make it.
Right.
And that you got to get that started on Saturday. You can't be losing games that you should win. And this game on Saturday against Lafayette is home.
Yes.
Yeah, so that'll be a good one.
Yeah, it's tough though. 3 out of 4 on the road coming up. So we'll see.
Yeah.
It is fun though. I mean, 2-0 is a great start. I mean, we couldn't have put ourselves in better position, I think, to start the year.
Oh, absolutely. You couldn't have asked for a better start to the season, especially with after like last year, how I kind of felt like our team. I don't want to say it was just a disappointing season, right? Like I think we all had like bigger hopes. It also felt like in a lot of those games, like we were in them. It was just like little things or a run here, a run there that kind of killed us.
Yeah, defense would be awesome. Offense couldn't score. Offense scores a lot. Defense can't get a stop.
Yeah, it was like it always felt like there was something like not right, and they really haven't seen that so far this year. So I certainly hope it keeps going. That's definitely the one thing I want to see.
Yeah, I am very encouraged though by what I've seen. So I hope that the Hounds can continue their success tomorrow. But speaking of a team that is not starting their season, but rather concluding their season, it's the men's and women's basketball teams. And Jimmy, the final game for the men's team is tomorrow at 5:00. They host American right here at Reitz Arena. It's their final regular season game before Patriot League tournament play begins next week. And Jimmy, the Hounds been playing pretty well recently. They got a huge win on Wednesday night, a blowout win against Holy Cross, 90-68. And recently they beat Lafayette a week ago. They went up to Lehigh and got a big win there. They lost a tough one here to BU recently, and then lost a tough one up at Army. And then they had a kind of a dud at Navy where they were playing really well. They just couldn't really finish. But I don't know, Jimmy. I've been a little encouraged what I've seen. And I know that the conference record doesn't really speak for itself. We're 6-11, but if we win Saturday, maybe a few chips go our way. There's a chance we could maybe host a game in the first round, or even better than that, we could maybe get a bye in the first round.
It's definitely going to be the first round.
I think it's going to be the first round.
Yeah, at this point,
I'm just saying mathematically, there is a small chance that it could happen.
I don't think so, because
the tiebreakers.
Yeah, I don't think with the tiebreakers we would be ahead of any of those teams who are. And also, there's multiple teams who are 7-10 and we're 6-11. So somebody else, if we were to win, we'd be 7-11. That would put us even with quite a few teams. So there would be a lot to cut out there. And I don't know if we would be able to jump those teams. I'm pretty sure we would not. Anyway, point is, we got our work cut out for us. We need to win this game against American, because that's definitely going to be the difference between a home and an away game. Because if we beat American, then we have a chance to host. And that's important, because you don't want to travel. You don't want to travel. And by the way, there's a chance if we did win that we would have to eventually run into a team like Navy again, or possibly Lehigh. It would just make our lives very difficult. So we need to have the easiest path possible. And that all starts by having a home playoff game. Would you agree?
Yeah, and having the home playoff game would be huge, because it would be on Tuesday, and students like us will obviously still be here. So I think a little home crowd boost would be nice too.
Certainly. I think that would be great. I think having a home playoff game here would be absolutely awesome.
That'd be really fun.
Yeah. And we really haven't had that kind of feel. I don't think there has been any home playoff games since our time.
I don't think so. Yeah. And when we went on that run during our sophomore year, which was 2021, all those games were on the road.
Yeah, they were all.
And we ended up winning a few of them. en route to the title game against Colgate where we fell. But yeah, we haven't had a home game, I don't think, since we've been here.
Yeah, and so this could be the first time, and we obviously want that to happen, but it all starts against American. So we have played American, obviously. We played them earlier in the season, and we did not do too well. It was on the road. It was a 55-71 loss for us. They had one player go off that game, Johnny O'Neill. He had 21 points. That's a pretty good game. And he also contributed 8 boards. So he's going to be the problem for us. We're going to have to find a way to stop him.
Yeah. And then I'm looking here at Americans' recent games. They're on a 5-game skid. So
yeah,
they haven't played well, but you know what? I mean, this is a huge game, I think, with the standings and kind of getting your confidence going into the conference tournament. So it's definitely a game that both teams would love to have.
Absolutely. And it's good that you mentioned that they're on a skid, Jeffrey. Like, that's kind of good for us because we say this all the time. It's about the present. It's about how you're playing at that time, especially in a sport like college basketball. I mean, we sit here and we say momentum is huge in sports. We've talked about in every single sport we've talked about all year. Momentum is massive. And right now, you said this before with the way the Hounds have been playing, they have a little bit of momentum right now. They've won 3 out of the last 4. They've been putting up a pretty decent amount of points, I thought. Every game except the Navy game. I think they put over 70 up on the board over that.
Yeah, we've put up 90 and 91 in our 2 of our last 4 games.
Yeah, so like we've been putting up a pretty decent amount of points, and that's good because I really feel like our offense has to be on for us to have a chance.
Yeah, I agree too.
Yeah, and when it's not on, we find ourselves oftentimes getting into a hole just because I feel like our defense doesn't always hold up, and when we're bad on offense, we sometimes go through several minute droughts, which really put us behind the ball.
Yeah, and I think the offense starts with the backcourt. I'm looking at Dion Perry and Jalen Andrews and Kenny Jones.
Yeah.
I feel like if those 3 guys are chipping in, or if one of them just goes off, I think everyone just follows suit. Because you're looking here at the box score from Wednesday. Dion Perry with 27, 6 threes. You're looking at Kenny and Jalen. Kenny at 12, Jalen at 17, and then Alonzo Fowler chipped in with 11, and he also had 11 boards. Nice little double-double. So I think the backcourt is the key for the offense. One of them has got to be making shots, and then hopefully a second or a third guy is making shots.
On the offensive end, I definitely agree with you that it goes through the 3 guards that you mentioned. Those are probably our 3 best offensive players. And really, like I said, we've been putting up points. How have we been doing it? We've been shooting pretty efficiently. We've been getting good looks, and it kind of starts with our main 3 players. They all handle the ball a decent amount. You know what I mean? They all take a lot of shots. So I agree with that, Jeffrey. Totally comes down to those 3 players. Additionally, another thing we need to do that we've been doing really well recently, we got to keep rebounding really well. I honestly, Golden has done a nice job rebounding. He almost had a triple-double the other night.
He did. He was close.
Yeah, he was really close. So obviously we want to keep that up. And that's just credit to him. Like, he is a very decent passer for a big man. Like, he's a good passer.
He is.
Yeah, that's one of the things that all the European players have, is they're all pretty decent passers. I mean, obviously we remember when Santi was here, he was a phenomenal passer for his size. But Golden, he could do it in the post, he can do it out to the threes. Having that is huge. And if he could just make the smart decisions, that's a real advantage.
Yeah, I feel like whenever he gets the ball at the high posts, he either tries to hand the ball off to one of the guards, or he just sees things. He sees someone cutting, for a 3. I mean, he has good vision.
He does. He is a good passer. That's a very good fundamental skill that he has. And honestly, I kind of wish that he put that to use a little bit more just throughout his career.
Yeah. I mean, the effort and energy is always going to be there with him. But yeah, I think over the years, you kind of see him show flashes of him with his potential, but sometimes you don't get it. But yeah, I think recently he's kind of turned some heads a little bit.
Yeah, no, he absolutely has turned heads. I think with his rebounding play and with his passing, that's really the improvement that I've seen this year. Absolutely, the energy in the defense. I agree with that as well, Jeff.
Yeah, so it's a big game for not just American, but for Loyola as well. So it's definitely going to be a big game that both teams need in terms of the standings when you're talking about seeding for the Patriot League men's basketball tournament. So that starts next week. But I think the women, they have a few more games. So we'll have to see how they do. I believe they have a game on Saturday. I think they're on the road. I think they play American. Yes, they play American at 2 o'clock on Saturday. So they're coming off a loss at Holy Cross. So hopefully they can bounce back there.
Yeah, I mean, for the women, obviously they're in a little bit of a different, or they're in the very similar situation to the men, where they're just trying to look for some momentum going into the tournament, and that's what we're looking for as well. Um, Here's the one thing that I feel like you could say about the women's team every single game. You can always count on Lex to have a decent game, just because she's such a force offensively. And like we were saying with Golden, she is also phenomenal at offensive and defensive rebounds. But really on offense, I really feel like she gives our team an advantage.
Yeah, and I think the key for the women too is, can they have secondary scoring every game? I feel like it's usually one lady that steps up, but if they can have multiple ladies that can step up, I'm looking here. Talia Dixon had 14 on Wednesday in the loss. Lex had a off night. She had 7 points and 13 boards though. I mean, that's still a good amount of rebounds, but if you can have other ladies like Bree Rossi and Kelly Radigan and others step up, I think that would be huge. Because I mean, the key for the women is, can they score enough points? I think they can. It's just sometimes I feel like the consistency isn't always there. But I think if you get other ladies involved, I think that's huge.
Yeah, I agree with that absolutely. I mean, the whole thing this year has been okay, Lex scores, then what else happens? I agree with that. Secondary scoring is huge. We do have some people who are capable of doing that. I definitely agree with the names you just said, especially Talia. I mean, that she's been a very good scorer for us secondary. So we're definitely looking to rely on her down the stretch here. As for this specific game against American, they're not very good either, right? They're not a great team.
No, they're not.
And this is a game that we have a chance in. And anytime we have a chance in a game, we obviously want to win. So that's kind of how we feel about that.
Yeah, I have confidence. I feel like both the men's and the women's teams have kind of gained a little bit of steam recently. And I know that they haven't won every game, but I feel like
a lot since last year. They really
I
have.
feel like they're getting more accustomed to playing with one another. I think the chemistry's definitely been way better than it was, say, in January. So that, I mean, that's going to bode well, I think, going into February and March tournament play. So yeah, I'm excited to see how it works out. But I wanted to jump to the NBA, Jimmy. We had a big coaching news story break as of the last hour or so. We have the Atlanta Hawks and Quinn Snyder, formerly the coach of the Utah Jazz. They're progressing in talks on a deal that would make Quinn Snyder the Hawks' next coach. And it comes as a result of the Hawks firing Nate McMillan on Tuesday. And so I know that McMillan, he had a decent tenure in Atlanta, but I felt like this year they get DeJounte Murray. They still have Trae Young. They still have John Collins and DeAndre Hunter and whoever, but they just haven't really been that great. They've been kind of average. And
I think below average. They have not exceeded expectations. I think that's the best.
Right. So now you're bringing in Quinn Snyder, who is a proven guy. He was leading the Jazz to perennial playoff appearances. You can question his success just because they didn't really get past second round. So he's been there, done that. He's worked with Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert in the past. So you think this is a good hire for Atlanta?
Well, yeah, let's just talk about that Utah experience, because I feel like that's the biggest thing here, right? Completely different situation in Utah. First of all, the West, when Quinn Snyder was there, as we still see now, was a dogfight. There's a lot of great teams out there, the Suns, the Warriors. I mean, think about how much the Warriors have dominated the league. Like, it was tough for anybody in the West. And there's a lot of great players in the West. There really is. We got LeBron, we got Jokic, we got Devin Booker. Well, none of them have won championships. Chris Paul, no, it's been the Warriors who have been doing it. So I wouldn't count that against him, because I still feel like he did a pretty good job in Utah. And he was the coach there for even before Donovan Mitchell showed up. Back when he had Hayward too, Gordon Hayward. Remember, they had that one team. They had a pretty good year, kind of out of nowhere.
Yeah, they won 50 games a few times.
Yeah.
I remember they went to the playoffs in, I think, 2017. They got to the second round before they lost to Golden State. The one year Quinn Snyder was there was Donovan Mitchell's rookie year. They ended up upsetting the Thunder in the first round, and then they lost in the second round. He's won a few playoff series, though.
No, he has. And
actually, you bring up comparing Utah to the rest of the West during Quinn Snyder's tenure. They had the best record in the NBA. I don't know if you remember this, in the 2020-2021 season. Unbelievable. I feel like people forget about that. They were the best team in the league in 2020-2021, record-wise.
Oh my God, yes, I remember.
They beat the Grizzlies in 5 in the first round, and then they kind of had a shocker.
Conley was the starting point guard, right?
Yeah, they had Conley, Mitchell, Bojan Bogdanovic, Royce O'Neal, and Rudy Gobert. Pretty good
Yeah.
starting five.
Yeah.
And then they lost to the Clippers in the second round. That was when Kawhi Leonard was injured. And then they just shockingly lost. And then last year they had a pretty decent year and then lost first round and they just decided to blow it up.
Yeah. And I mean, they kind of had no choice because it looked like Gobert wanted out. It looked like Donovan Mitchell wanted out.
Couldn't really get along with one
They couldn't
another.
get along
And
with
Quinn
them.
Snyder had actually resigned. They didn't even fire him, the Jazz. He just
Right.
resigned.
Well, he knew he wanted another job. He probably wanted to pick where he could go. And, I would say the difference between this team and that team was, listen, I don't want to out a guy, but Rudy Gobert, no offense, it just seems like no matter where he goes, it kind of just disappoints. Is that fair to say? I mean, he's been okay, I think, for Minnesota, but it's not.
He definitely hasn't been as
No.
good with Minnesota as he was with Utah.
No.
This first few years.
Disappointed,
He's
think.
disappointed this
And
season.
they gave up a lot in that trade,
They did.
and it did not. It's just not.
And then the
what
Jazz
they
ended
want.
up flipping some of those players for picks. So I think
Yeah.
the Jazz know what they're
Well,
trying
Danny
to do.
Ainge is running the Jazz now. That's why.
Yeah.
So they're blowing up. They blew up the team in Utah, and obviously now Quinn Snyder's going to the Hawks. But let's talk about how this affects the Hawks, because that's really what the most important focus is. We can all agree that Quinn Snyder is a guy who's an acceptable hire for an NBA team.
Oh, he's
He
a
had-
very satisfactory
yeah,
head coach.
and actually, I don't know if you remember it, but before they hired him, the Lakers were thinking about making an offer to Quinn Snyder.
They
There was
were
a lot of discussion.
Before they hired Darvin Ham. Yeah.
So, this guy's had his chance. You know what he kind of reminds me of? Like an NFL coach who's like out for a year and is just like looking for a new spot. Like, hey, like Arians when he jumped ship from the Cardinals to the Buccaneers. I mean, obviously, like it's a new team, but remember, he started off there when they had Jameis. It wasn't the first season, wasn't Brady. Everybody only remembers him for Brady, but he did just jump ship to a younger team. And listen, they have a star player. They have Trae Young. That's who the whole team kind of focuses around. You would agree with that, Jeffrey.
Oh, no doubt.
Yeah, he's a great point guard. Especially on the scoring wise. I would say there's not really that many other point guards that you can, maybe with the exception of Steph Curry, who can essentially just walk up the court and just potentially never pass anybody else and still get a basket.
Yeah, maybe Damian Lillard.
Yeah, maybe Damian Lillard, maybe like prime James Harden and Kyrie and Steph Curry, right? There's really not that many true point guards who really do that. But point is, he is one of them. He is a very good player. And honestly, I don't think the rest of the team's that bad. I think they've made some bad decisions though. Like they let some good players get away from them. The Kevin Huerter thing, that was a guy I felt like they should have kept around.
Yeah, and you're looking at Herter now with the Kings. They're third in the West. He's been a nice spark plug there with their starting lineup.
And you know what the GM is actually of the Hawks? It's Landry Fields, who I don't know if you remember this.
Okay.
He played for the Knicks. He was the guy who let Jeremy Lin stay in his apartment.
Wow.
Yes. And then the assistant GM for the Hawks is Kyle Korver. So those two.
Those are some household names.
Those are just like randomized names. It's like
very random names.
Yeah, if you just picked a random NBA name, like Landry Fields would probably be one of the first ones that pops up. Because he didn't have a very long career, and now he's switched over now to the executive role. But it's kind of funny how that worked out. So many players kind of now I feel like they're switching over to that. We even see that with Elton Brand, obviously, with the Sixers. He was a player back in the day for them. But anyway, back to the Hawks team themselves. It focuses around Trae Young, and I like the rest of their roster though. Like I do think John Collins is a pretty decent player. Like I actually think he's a little underrated. Going down with it, when he's at his best, him and Trae do have a nice like big man to point guard kind of combo.
Yeah, John Collins gives me a little Aaron Gordon vibes. Very athletic power forward, can shoot from the outside, can fly through the gym.
Decent defender too, gives decent effort.
Yeah, can guard probably any position for the most part. But I think the thing that they need, I feel like they need another big piece that they're kind of missing. I think they tried to get that with DeJounte Murray, and DeJounte Murray is a fine player, but I don't think he's a superstar.
That just never felt like the right move to me though, because you already had Trae Young.
Right. I think they kind of want to make a star-studded backcourt. They wanted to try it, but yeah, I just think he's not like a guy that's going to move the needle for you. He's not bad. I mean, he's a fine player. I would take him as my starting point guard.
Certainly doesn't move the needle.
He'll give you 20 a night.
Yeah, but that's
a fine player.
That's not enough to really make the Hawks into more of a contender. They're going to need another move. Ideally, though, I feel like the best situation for them would be to kind of get DeJounte Murray out to clear some cap space and try and bring on another star, ideally.
Yeah,
But it just feels like because DeJounte Murray and Trae Young play the same position, that it's just so unnecessary. It almost actually mirrors the situation in Minnesota where you have Karl Anthony Towns and then you also have Rudy Gobert.
it's a very weird basketball fit.
It doesn't work out, and it's obvious it's not working out because it's the court. You can see that on the court. And the Hawks are a team who, let's not remember, it was not that long ago that they were a team in the conference finals.
Yeah. And they were trying to show that they were for real the next season. And I mean, they had an okay year. They got in the playoffs, but lost first round. And then this year, they've been just very pedestrian.
Yeah.
And it's tricky because I feel like in the short term, now that you bring on Quinn Snyder, you could try to maybe win with this core starting five for now. Maybe you give it another year just because they're all pretty young. So I think maybe giving it one more year, maybe with a new coach, maybe that will unlock something. But if you're trying to compete with
I think
the
you need
Celtics,
this
the
year.
Bucks, and the Sixers and other teams that are above you in the East, I feel like you got to make a move. If you're trying to get up there, you got to make a big trade or something happen.
I think for this year, though, it's going to be more of the trial and error process because the season's already kind of not what you wanted, right? You want to make the playoffs, but at this point, you got to kind of find out what works quickly. So there's going to be trying a lot of different things. I'm sure Quinn Snyder already has some ideas going in. I'm sure he's given some thought to how he can improve the Hawks. It's not like he just woke up this morning and was like, oh, I want to be the Hawks coach now. Like he had to have some interest in the position, and I'm sure he's familiar with their team. So he has some ideas about what he's going to do to improve them. But the thing is like, if they go to next year with the same team, Jeff, like, I feel like they would be hurting themselves because I feel like the offseason is really the best time to improve. I feel like during the season, it's very tough. The offseason in the NBA, I really feel like is the best chance.
Yeah, you can bring in new guys, a new coach in this instance, and you can kind of trial and error things like you said, see what works, see what doesn't, and then yeah, hopefully the players stay healthy and they live up to their potential. But it's interesting because Quinn Snyder, he hasn't really finalized the deal yet. And it's interesting. I'm reading the article here on ESPN.com. Snyder's actually out of the country right now with his family, and he has been talking to the Hawks. They're trying to get a deal done and whatnot, but it's not certain that he's going to take over this season, which I found kind of interesting.
Oh, wow. So,
Because
okay.
the Hawks did announce that Joe Prunty, who I think is one of their assistant coaches, he's going to be the interim coach for now. So they haven't explicitly said that Snyder's going to be the coach now. And they also haven't officially hired him yet, but it sounds like it's going to happen. But
Yeah.
it's interesting, though, if it
But
doesn't
how
happen
did-
now.
It reminds me of the Ime Udoka situation. We thought he was going to be the Nets coach, and then whatever happened with that.
Yeah, he ended up being hired. They went with Jacques Vaughn, and it actually worked out pretty well until KD and Kyrie just wanted out, and then that whole thing blew up.
Yeah, that whole thing blew up.
But credit to Jacques Vaughn, though, I will say.
He's
He's done a
coaching defense.
very good job.
And they gave him an extension, too.
Right. And I actually don't think their team now is not like too bad. I know it's not a contender probably anymore, but
Simmons is killing him now. He's just
Yeah.
so unproductive as a scorer.
I know. I think the other problem is they have so many players that are literally the same player,
Yeah.
3-and-D guys. And that's what the Mavs problem was. And now it's the Nets problem.
But can I be honest with you? The Mavs were at least a step ahead because they had Luka. Like,
Right.
hypothetically, though, I was saying this last night. If they added like a star player, you could make a case that they're we're in the same spot they are now, like the same like ranking in the East. Like they're probably middle of the pack Eastern Conference team if they got a star in there, like
Yeah.
a true star.
No, definitely. Yeah.
And their roster really isn't that far off.
No.
Like Mikal Bridges is a really nice player. Cam Thomas has been playing pretty well. Johnson, who they got from the Suns in that trade.
Cam Johnson. Yes.
You know, these are all guys that, like you said, are very similar.
And they
but
can
they're
make
good
shot and they can
NBA
make
Yeah, but
shots.
they're good NBA players.
Yeah.
Really,
Both sides of the ball.
Yes. Really, though, it might be one of the better defensive teams in the NBA.
Right. They're going to be an interesting playoff matchup because I think they're going to be around the 4 and the 5 slots. So if they get Cleveland or Miami or New York in the first round,
Them and Miami
Be kind of
would
an
be a
interesting
very gritty series.
matchup.
That
Yeah.
would be a very gritty series.
You got Jimmy Butler
Yeah.
and Bam Adebayo against that team.
Yeah, that would be probably one of the more defensive oriented matchups that we've
Right.
seen in a while in the NBA.
The other thing I didn't even mention to you before the show, and now I'm thinking about the Heat, they picked up Kevin Love.
They did.
The Cavs bought Kevin Love out, and then he cleared waivers and signed with the Miami Heat. So I don't know any thoughts about that, but Kevin Love kind of not on the tail end of his career yet, but he's kind of headed that way. He won a championship with Cleveland. He was there for a while. He was the last mainstay from that Cavs 2016 title team. So do you think he's going to add anything to the Heat? I mean, obviously in the locker room, I'm sure he's going to be a great presence, but on the court, do you think he's got something left in the tank?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know what kind of role they're going to have for him because he's what's his role? What's his best player? I mean, or best attribute? I would say it's kind of like the offensive end, right?
Post scorer,
Yeah,
stretch four.
yeah, maybe like a shooting option for a big guy off the bench. I think that would be like his best possible role that he could fit in. It's interesting too because, you know, I feel like he's been not a big name in the NBA for a while. Like the Kevin Love appreciation tour has certainly gone down.
Yeah, ever since I think they won the title in 2016, the Cavs, I feel like he's been kind of just hiding in the background because it was all about LeBron and Kyrie.
Since LeBron left. Well, remember, ever since LeBron left, because he was still under contract all this time. That was the weirdest thing. Was like, all right, what do? You just got Kevin Love here.
Right. And they didn't know what to do with him. And it was crazy because
and nobody would take him because of the contract.
He was being paid so much money, and then they moved him to the bench. And he actually did pretty well off the bench, I think, last season.
Yeah. I mean, that's going to be his role in Miami. It's certainly about the bench. That's certainly where it all starts for him, and that's probably going to be his role, right? I mean, with Adebayo there, I can't see him taking away minutes from him in any way.
Yeah, and I know we have a few minutes left before the break. I'll try to sneak this question in. It's kind of a little bit off topic in terms of players. It's more about teams. So, would you agree that Boston's probably the favorite to win the title right now? It's tough, but do you think they'd be like a slight favorite over other teams?
Listen.
I mean, they've clearly been the best team in the league.
They have been the best team in the league, but they're the team that's like the best well-oiled machine right now. Like they're the team that's running and operating the best, I feel.
Okay.
Like the Suns not having Durant, it's like it's a question mark, right?
But when he comes back, which is I think in a week, we'll see. It's very exciting.
No, that's the thing that's why I'm like putting an asterisk next to this answer because I almost feel like I don't really know just because of that. And also too, Curry's out, right? Like we want to see him back.
Right.
So
I was gonna lead into this question. Do you think the Celtics' biggest threat is in the East? Do you think the Bucks or the Sixers or the Cavs is a threat to them? Or do you think the bigger threat's out west? You got to look at Phoenix. You can't ignore Denver. Denver's been a really good team this year too. And then you also have teams that are kind of in that second tier, but kind of in that upper-ish tier with the Grizzlies, the Clippers, the Mavs, etc. Do you think there's more of a threat to the Celtics from the East or the West?
Okay, so I think without a doubt, the answer to this question should just be the Celtics have a lot of threats in general because all those teams that you just mentioned are threats. The Bucks are certainly a threat. I mean, they have Giannis Antetokounmpo. I would agree that they're the biggest threat in the East. However, I think they're more likely to get by them than they would be at a team in the West, just because it feels like there are so many super teams in the West.
Yeah, I agree. I think the Bucks are probably their biggest threat now, but I wouldn't ignore the Nuggets or the Suns either.
In the Eastern Conference, it's without a doubt the Bucks. But if they if they were going to get by there, I would totally say that it would be a team from the West. Like I would be more scared of a team from the West than I'd be the Bucks.
100%. So we'll take a quick break here, and after this, so we'll be right back. We'll be talking some more sports. So stay with us. Welcome back to WLOY, Loyola Radio, streaming online at WLOY.org and Campus TV channel 111.1. You're listening to After the Whistle with Jeffrey Bozzi and Jimmy Cody. Now we're going to focus our talk here from basketball to football. We had some interesting off-the-field news, Jimmy, and it involves your team, the Denver Broncos. And I remember you sent me an article this morning about Russell Wilson, and I think the title of it was Too Much Influence, but just give some backdrop on what it was talking about.
Yeah, so essentially it was from The Athletic. It was just essentially a drop about Russell Wilson the last year. I mean, there's been maybe with the exception of Deshaun Watson, nobody else, and Tom Brady, nobody else has had the spotlight under them more. Oh, and Aaron Rodgers too. Those four guys really command a lot of the attention. Now that I think about it, like really, they really do. But Russ has been under it for all of the wrong reasons. Obviously, it was not a great year for the Broncos. It's not a great year for Russ. But this all started in February 2022 when Russell Wilson went to the owner of the Seahawks and essentially said, I want Pete Carroll and John Schneider, who's the GM. Pete Carroll's the head coach of the Seahawks, gone. And that's crazy. That is crazy. That is a very bold move to do. Um, and at the time, too, Russell's agent, or the year before, actually, Russell's agent had put out a list of teams that he would be willing to go to, which had included teams like the Giants, Saints. There were some other names on there, but it was like, big time teams like those two. And at the time, they had Peyton, and obviously the Giants are a premier franchise in biggest city, so that's why he wanted to go there. But the point is like the writing was on the wall for a little bit, so that's the first way to start it. But it seems like they did not have a great relationship, based on what this article was saying, because it seemed like him going above their heads completely is that's a bad look. And the reason is because Russell is saying the Seahawks with Pete Carroll and John Snyder essentially held him back from winning Super Bowls and also more individual achievements. That was what the article said. I think that's a little bit of a push, but you know who the guy was that he wanted them to replace Pete Carroll with? It was Sean Payton.
Wow.
Yeah. So
that's really coming full circle.
Yeah. So he wanted them to fire those two, and he wanted Sean Payton to be the guy who gets it switched. Now, Russ didn't really have anything to say about that. He literally just put out a tweet that said, I love Pete. He was a father figure to me, and John believed in me and drafted me as well. I never wanted them fired. All any of us wanted to do was win. I'll always have respect for them and love for Seattle. So that's the Seattle part of that. But this article kept going on and on and on. And it really went to how dysfunctional the Broncos season was. There were some off the record names. There were some on the record names. The guys who publicly came to support Russell Wilson in the article was Judy, Kendall Hinton, and Dalton Reisner, who was a guard, which they all kind of spoke positively about Russ. But the one thing that they said in this article, and I thought it was really interesting, is Russell has an office at the Denver facility. It's on the second floor. Now, from what this article said, there was an unnamed source. Players don't typically go to the second floor because that's like the executive kind of portion only. And if you're going up there, more than like you're getting released, it's saying. So it almost felt like Russell was above the rest of the team by doing that. And that was kind of the precedent that it set. And actually, in the article, another player was also mentioned who we already know I despise this player, but Melvin Gordon. He was talking about the coaching, and he was saying how Russ wanted to do his own thing because he had what he thought was successful from Seattle. He had his own coaches that he hired on his own dime to come in and basically coach him there, which was conflicting against what Hackett wanted. And basically, from the words of Melvin Gordon in this article, Hackett had it was like a little bit of his offense. It was what Russell wanted, and none of it went together at all, and it was a dumpster fire. Well, yeah, that makes complete sense. That's why the offense must have looked so horrible. And then I saw another thing too, that apparently Russell would, be changing things at the line of scrimmage, and the offensive linemen had no idea. I mean, there was a while where we were leading the NFL in penalties because we had so many false starts or delay of games. There were so many miscommunications. And now it kind of makes sense just because it seems like there was just so much dysfunction going on here from the outside coaches to Nathaniel Hackett and George Payton allowing that, where it kind of became like a conflict of interest just because, like, who's Russ listening to? The guy that he pays or the actual coaches? And also, too, Russ, one of the things they said was the last 2 weeks of the season after they had fired Hackett, that was when he decided that he was not going to be in the office anymore. And I think that's funny because that's actually probably the two best games that the team played all year were the last two games. But like, I felt like any coach who had any sort of like brain would have noticed that Russell should not have been doing this by like week 5 or 6. Like that is like, he was not good enough to be doing that.
It's crazy that it took that long.
Yeah, it took until the last 2 weeks of the season. I would love to know who finally convinced them to come down, but they said, usually the players spend their time in the locker room when they're there, right? The cafeteria, the locker room, that's kind of, or the practice portions, which is the weight room or the field. And for him to be in his own office away from everybody, that's not a good look. That's not good for team chemistry. like no wonder some of the guys on the team hated him. Like we've seen the KJ Hamler incident. We saw the Mike Purcell thing again when they played Carolina. There were so many, or we saw the Christmas Day nightmare. I mean, that was one of the worst losses ever for the Broncos. And that game was, I think, the epitome of Russ. Something needs to change here. And thank God the week after he realized that he should be in the locker room more and not in his office. But I think the number one story that stands out here is just there was no control on this team. It was just a free for all.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. I mean, I'll start with even going back to when he was in Seattle. I think it's so interesting how Sean Payton is the guy that he wanted to replace Pete Carroll. And it's funny because I said full circle earlier, but now that Russell Wilson has Sean Payton as his coach, maybe he's going to be more willing to listen to what he has to say. Maybe
Certainly.
his input's going to be more valuable than Nathaniel Hackett's input. I think that's probably pretty clear that he's going to be more of an open book nowadays. But the office thing's so interesting too, because since his office is on the second floor, maybe, I don't know, he thinks he's above the players, which you wouldn't want to believe. It's just
it looks that
the
way
fact is
on
the
paper.
fact. Yeah, I mean, visually, I mean, if his office is there with Hackett's or whoever, the executives, Elway, I don't know.
It's not Elway, but George Payton. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not a good look at all whatsoever. It's just not something that any other franchise is going through. Patrick Mahomes doesn't do that. He's a significantly better quarterback. Tom Brady doesn't do that either.
Yeah. The audibles, though, at the line of scrimmage, though, during plays, that's kind of strange.
It wasn't even that. It was like changing the snap count. Like there was just so many.
He's trying to screw over the offensive line.
Well, you know what it was? I almost think, here's what I think. Russ wanted to be the man, right? Like that's what he wanted. Fine. He goes to Denver. He gets his contract. They gave him more than any opportunity to be the man, right? Like the franchise was literally built around him, like right now, like the whole thing. And it almost felt like he got into something that was too big for his bridges, right? Like I felt like if he had just went to a place that had some structure, he fell in line, he just did what he needed to do to be successful instead of trying to be, Superman and carry the weight of the entire franchise on his back. It's just not necessary. I feel like he could have been a lot more successful. And I feel like that's why getting Sean Payton is going to help so much, just because this is a guy who literally turned around the Saints in such a great fashion that, like, I feel like this is the one guy where it's possible to turn this around. If it was another coach with no experience, like D'Amico Ryans or something, could you imagine the disaster that he would be getting himself into?
Yeah. And I think all of what you just said goes back to the larger point of just how there was no control or the lack
It
thereof.
was dysfunction.
And I think with Sean Payton coming in, you would think that he's definitely going to care way more than Nathaniel Hackett. I mean, that's obviously the assumption.
And he's going to probably do a better job too.
Right. He's going to have not just Russell Wilson, but every other player on that 53-man roster in check. I mean, he's going to want obviously the best of them, but I'm sure he's going to, I don't know, play around a little bit, but he's going to stick to business, obviously. But I think the fact that I feel like every game last year, maybe not every game, but every other week you would hear, oh, Hackett messed up the time management or Russ did something on the sidelines or something. And I think that was probably contributing to the lack of control or authority. And so I think Sean Payton being there now, I think it's definitely going to improve it for sure. There's no doubt in my mind.
Well, it's funny because in the story, I remember we talked about this week too when it happened, how the Denver crowd had to count down the play clock because the Broncos offense was too incompetent to see that it was going down, and they actually ended up taking themselves out of field goal range with multiple delay of game penalties, which is embarrassing. But the point is, the crowd had to count. Sean Payton in his press conference actually made a highlight of that. He goes, yeah, the fans won't have to be doing that anymore. That's ridiculous. Like,
yeah.
And you know what the thing I love about Sean Payton the most? Before he even was day one of becoming the coach at the press conference, he said, no, Russell Wilson's not going to have his outside coaches. That is not a thing.
Yeah.
And
I mean, he made that clear cut from when he stepped foot in the office.
That is the perfect thing. And correct me if I'm wrong, but Russ just wanting to do his own thing almost feels like a little bit of a disrespect towards Hackett. I mean, this Hackett guy just has to be a complete joke that he just let Russell do everything, like whatever he wanted. I mean, it's just interesting too, because I feel like as much as we don't consider Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers to be the same, like they might have they kind of have that ignorance about him. And obviously that's true with a lot of quarterbacks, but it might have worked better with Rodgers just because he had an OC role. But I feel like it didn't work out with
Yeah,
Russell Wilson. Like I thought I kind of consider them similar just because based on what I'm seeing. I mean, if there's another quarterback who would have their own office, I think it would be Aaron Rodgers.
I think so.
Yeah. So I don't know. I'm just interested to hear like what your thoughts are about that dynamic because
Well,
clearly it was not a success.
I agree. I think there are some similarities between the two. And I find it interesting, actually, earlier, it's kind of unrelated to the Rodgers comparison, but when you brought up how Russell Wilson was upset at the Seahawks management that they were close to winning Super Bowls, and I don't know, maybe you said he wasn't really playing up to par. I feel like he was always in the MVP conversation every year, and I don't think he has an MVP, but he's always been up there. So I don't really know what more you could
Yeah.
ask. Now, maybe the team could have, I don't know, been in more NFC championships or whatever. And obviously that Marshawn Lynch not running the ball in the Super Bowl, that's obviously going to live with fans forever.
And that's a bad look for Russ because at the time, remember, he was still a young quarterback when that
And
happened.
I actually think Marshawn Lynch made a comment about the whole Wilson situation recently. I read it somewhere. I forget exactly what he said, but he was kind of calling out his demeanor, I guess you could call it. But I do agree that there are some similarities between Wilson and Rodgers, but we've seen Rodgers, and he's a little older too. So he's played well, I think, in his late 30s. I mean, we've seen him been in perennial NFC championships.
Better player than
And he is, and Russ is kind of entering his mid 30s, and he'll get into his later 30s coming up in a few years. But I think he has a chance to be similar to Rodgers, where he can still compete for Super Bowls
well, hopefully MVPs if you're
and
Aaron
MVPs.
Rodgers. You know,
And
that matters more to Aaron.
I know
Rodgers.
that it's really hard to, I don't know, defend Russ's play just in the last year and a half, 2 years.
Sir, I would say the last year because the year before, at least he still threw for 25 touchdowns.
Right. And he missed half the games.
Yeah.
So it's hard to judge that. But I don't know if last year was just a blip. I hope it was just a 1 year dud.
I hope so too, because I'll say this.
He can still sling it. I mean, we saw it in person. He made some throws in Baltimore. I know it's one game, and I know they only put up 9 points, but he can still get outside the pocket and make things happen. And I think a lot of that has to do with the play calling. So I think Peyton being there is huge.
Yeah, and actually, Jeff, I'll take this one step further. That I'm going to go back to that Melvin comment, only because this guy's been open book recently. He's talking about the Hackett Russ offense disaster split. If those other weeks when whoever was calling plays, I'm pretty it was Justin Eaton, who was like our OC or something. I don't even know, whatever. It was a disaster. But whoever it was, those last 2 weeks calling plays, we saw the offense look so much better. So whatever that was, maybe run something similar to that, or was Hackett just like I don't know. There's just so much dysfunction that I don't even know where the blame goes because it was just so much. I think it could be tied to a little bit of everybody because the players didn't play good on the offense. Russ was obviously not good. The coaching wasn't good. There were certainly plenty of injuries. There were certainly plenty of guys who could have played better this season. I think there's a lot of blame to go across the board. Russ is the big name, so he's always going to take the blame in this situation just because he's the star quarterback. But at the same time, like he needs to be better next year. And if he's not, that's a real reason for concern.
Yeah, that would
Especially under
definitely
Sean
be
Payton.
a red flag considering the coaching move and then just the contract itself. And he's going to have to be better because the other teams in their division, the Raiders, the Chiefs, and the Chargers. I mean, I don't know what the Raiders are going to be. They're kind of an unknown, but you figure the Chargers will be in the mix again. They were a playoff team, and the Chiefs obviously are the Super Bowl champions. So you figure that they're not going away anytime soon. But internally, though, with the Broncos, they have some good pieces there. It's just, I think, a matter of, I don't know, having more discipline and then maybe adding some guys in the free agency and in the draft. Maybe a few chips go their way, and who knows, they could surprise a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think
it's tough with the AFC, though. The AFC is very competitive.
Yeah, absolutely.
But they can be in there. I think they can be a playoff team.
It really ultimately comes down to Russ. Like I said this last year, I'll say it again. The Broncos go as far as Russell Wilson will take them. If Russell Wilson is playing amazing and throwing 35, 40 touchdowns, under 10 picks, that's awesome. Like, that's exactly what we want. But if it's like another year like last year, it's going to be a train wreck. It really is. Like, he really is ultimately what he's boom or bust for us.
Right. And I still think he can get back to the 35, 40 touchdown seasons. I don't know if he can have multiple. Maybe he can have one or two.
I mean, honestly, I think
Maybe being there for a
maybe
year is nice because now he kind of knows what his receivers are like.
yeah, well, obviously we're hoping the chemistry grows. I really the part that I'm most interested to see is how Sean Payton takes Russell Wilson's game and expands it. How does he make it better? I think the most obvious answer, I don't know, just because he didn't do it that much last year, but he was because he was kind of hurt in the beginning of the season, but he started doing it way more towards the end of the season. That's his running ability. Like they gotta use that. They have to because it's an tribute at this point. The guy's 33 years old. Like he's already played in the NFL for a while. Like let him run, dude. Like not I'm not talking about like every single play, but like we're gonna have to incorporate it into our offense.
Exactly,
With a
especially with the
balance.
Javante Williams injury.
You
I
have
mean,
no
you
idea.
got to add another dynamic
Yeah.
piece to it. And the thing is, I feel like when Russ runs the ball, at least back to his Seattle days, he was really good off schedule, especially when he's trying to throw and then he just doesn't see anyone open and then he just scrambles. He's really good at that. But even when they design runs for him, I mean, it's usually 10 yards every time.
No, I'll tell you what. Towards the end of the season, I felt like we started using Russell a lot more in the goal line, and that's what the Eagles do with Jalen Hurts. Like, not just in general, their red zone offense, they use a lot of QB runs. And I would have loved for the Broncos to do that a little bit more. Now, who's that on? Is that on Russ saying I'm not running? Is that on Hackett saying I have my own offense and I'm Mr. Hackett and I'm an idiot? Like, what is that? Like, there's so many questions there that you can ask. Like really, there's just so much dysfunction that I feel like just putting a slash through last year. Let's see what Sean Payton does as a good coach, and if it's a disaster, then we need to make some moves and get Russell out of here or bring in a new quarterback or something. My only thing is, I just hope Russell Wilson does not get hurt next year because if could you imagine if it's a major injury where he's not for whatever portion of next year and he's also out for a portion of the year after. I mean, because that will take that contract make it even worse. I mean, that would be like an ultimate disaster.
Yeah, and then you would probably think, oh, you have to give him another shot because he didn't play. And then I don't know if that would sit with the fans too well, just based on
And
last
then
year.
also, if they have their first round pick and they're kind of tanking, there might be an option for
There
quarterback.
could be a gem in there that you want.
Yeah, it's like there's so
Who
many
could save you
things.
so much money.
Yeah, well, not really, because you're gonna have to pay Russ anyway.
Yeah.
But
But
it's
even
like,
if you got him off the books somehow and you're with that gem rookie QB, I don't know. There's so many moving parts to it.
there are a lot of moving parts to it.
We'll see though. There's a lot of questions that will have to be answered, and they're going to be answered down the road. But for now, though, I think getting Sean Payton there was a great step, and I think the next step is probably figuring things out in house, cleaning up the mess, whatever mess is in there, and then getting some good draft picks and free agents.
Certainly.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's all the time we have for today on After the Whistle. Thank you as always for listening. We will be back on Monday talking some more sports. So thank you as always for listening and have a great weekend.